Morning, church. Happy Mother's Day. We are really blessed here. We have got some great grandmothers, and we've got some mothers-to-be, and everything in between. And we're so blessed to have the godly women among us that we do. And you really are, truly, a blessing. I don't know what this world would be like without godly mothers. I don't even want to think about what it would be like without godly mothers. We had 13 baptisms at Eddie Warrior this week on Friday. God continues to bless that work with wonderful fruit, and we're so very, very thankful for all those who work in that area and make such a difference in the lives of those women. Again, I always say this, but it's true. I wish that there was some way that y'all could be there and watch the expressions of these women as they come up out of the water and as they realize that their sins have been forgiven and that they have this new start, this new birth, this fresh relationship with God. It's really a blessing to be able to experience that. And all of you in your support, as well as those who in particular work in that area, I just pray that God will continue to bless you. This morning, I do want us to spend some time talking about mothers, and in particular, moms, how you can be a blessing to your children. What characteristics would you say are important in a mother? I think it'd be fascinating to, if we had the time to take a poll and just see what you as individuals thought as you look at motherhood, at those characteristics that you believe to be most important in a mother. And I want you to think about this. When God chose a mother for his son, what traits were of particular importance to him? Why did God choose this little girl out of Nazareth to be the mother of his son? Of all the millions of women in the world that God could have chosen, why did he choose Mary? I've got to believe that she had a unique view of him, that is of God, and of life, and of motherhood. And God said, she's the one. She's going to raise my son. And you know, he picked the very best person for the job when he chose her. I like to go back whenever I write one of these and just reread the stories of some of the great women of the Bible, some of the great mothers of the Bible. And as you go back and you look at women like Hannah and Jochebed and Elizabeth and Mary, I noted 5 in particular qualities that set these women apart that I would like for us to focus on this morning. And the first one is this: moms, that you model for your children moral and spiritual character. I really do believe that good character is caught as well as taught. I would also argue that bad character is caught as well as taught. In fact, the longer I live, the more convinced I am that character is something that is caught perhaps more than it's taught. Because it's one thing to hear about how we need to live and what we need to do. It's quite another thing to see that exemplified and lived out in somebody's life. And I think if you'll think back and think about it, what really impacts your life are the people who model for you. And you watch those models and you emulate those models. Now, poor modeling has an impact. You know, I think about Leah and Rachel and their sons. There's a real rivalry between these two women and the affection of Jacob. And I believe that this rivalry between these women affected their children. In fact, I think it affected Israel from that point forward. Why is it that the 12 tribes never seemed to be that close, never seemed to get along, too often seemed to be at each other's throats? I've got to think to some degree it goes back to the fact that right from the start, there was this negative, this atmosphere, this resentment that was found between these two women and that carried over to their sons. On the other hand, there's no question that positive modeling has an impact. As Paul writes to Timothy, I've been reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. Paul says, I'm not surprised when I see a Timothy, because I look at a Lois and I look at a Eunice and I look at their faith and I look at their example, and here's Timothy emulating the example that he's seen. And so I would encourage you to model for them moral and spiritual character. Second, I would ask you to bless them with love. Now, in Titus chapter 2, verse 4, it talks about the fact that this love is not a given, because Paul, there talking to older women, will say to them, I want you to teach the younger women how to agape their husbands, how to agape their children, how to seek the highest good of their family. Now, I do believe that God created us with a need to love, and I believe He created mothers to give that love. That's why He gave them a lap, and that's why He gave them arms, and that's why He gave them the gentle touch that He does. And that's of incredible, incredible value. A mother who knows and practices agape is going to richly bless her children, because she's going to give them a gift on top of a gift. I believe God has given a mother a natural gift of love, a reflection, by the way, of God's heart that I think that shows up in mothers in a way that it doesn't in dads. And I'm not saying dads don't love their kids, but moms love kids in a different way than dads love their kids. That's just the way it is. And we see that mother's love, and I think that shows us God's heart. I really do. But on top of that, before I go there, let me come back to something here. As I was thinking about a mother's love and what that means, it's been years ago now, I wrote an article for the Bulletin, and I pulled it up, and I want to read part of it to you, because I think it expresses just what a blessing a mother's love is, and how deep and abiding that love is. Here's what I wrote, and this was, 10 years ago, better now. Carol and I welcomed our third grandson, Elijah Kevin Rouse, into the world this past week. Most of you know that his arrival was not without some trial and suspense. Rachel, our daughter-in-law, has been basically flat on her back 22 hours a day since Thanksgiving, and this was in March. That was the only way she could carry Elijah to term without his birth being way premature. I was down in Lubbock the last part of January to attend a workshop at the Sunset Church of Christ. That enabled me to stay with Adam and Rachel for a few days. Adam celebrated his birthday while I was there, and I took him and Rachel out to dinner. We rolled her in and out of the restaurant in a wheelchair. On the way home, we stopped at the store to pick up a few groceries. Rachel begged to come in with us, so we put her in a wheelchair and just pushed her around the store. She had this huge smile on her face the whole time. At one point she said, "You won't believe how enjoyable it is just to go to the grocery store." Because of her love for that baby yet unborn, Rachel was willing to do whatever it took to see he made it here healthy and whole. If that meant basically being bedfast and homebound for 3.5 months, so be it. As with so many mothers, she would do what she had to do. They don't hand out medals for things like that. Mamas who stay up endless nights caring for sick children don't receive civic awards. When mom doesn't buy a new coat for 15 years so the kids can have warm coats for schools, it never makes the television news. Clean clothes and hot meals and hugs and kisses too often get taken for granted. But I believe God notices, and I know Daddy and the kids do as well. You know, all his life, my grandson, Eli, is going to know that his mama wanted him. that his mama stayed flat on her back for 3.5 months to make sure that he could enter this world and have a life. What a gift. What a gift. And that's the kind of gift that I believe a mother can give and should give, and so often do give to their children. Bless them with love. Now, thirdly, show them selflessness. Consider what Mary had to endure, and we've talked about this before, I think in the context of one time of Christmas and the birth of Jesus. But I mean, think about her embarrassment. Think about the fact that her life is altered forever. Think about what she endured to be the mother of Jesus. How do you tell? How do you tell your mom and dad that you're pregnant and Joseph is not the father of your child? How do you tell? Can you imagine? I want you to think about this. When she tells Joseph, I'm pregnant, and Joseph knows he's not the father. And she knows, remember what the scripture says, he's minded to put her away privately. He doesn't want to embarrass her. She's already embarrassed enough. But he's minded to divorce her quietly. The agony, the emotional agony that girl went through. And yet, she was willing to do it and honored God as she did it. You talk about selfless. That woman was selfless to do what she did and endure what she had to go through. And as Jim so beautifully illustrated a while ago, in John chapter 19, when Jesus is dying on that cross, I can't imagine the emotions that were going through that mother as she stood there and watched him die. But near the cross of Christ stood his mother. Now that to me again is a mama's love, and that's a selflessness that is challenging and beautiful. Think about the beautiful spirit of Hannah and the impact that must have had on young Samuel. Remember, she prays, begs God to give her a child, and he does. And she's promised God, if you'll give me that child, I'll give him back to you. And she does that. She gives that baby boy back to God. He's raised in the tabernacle. But every year she comes, and every year she brings him garments, and every year, I'm sure, he hears the story of how she had prayed to God that God would give him to her, and God did that. And now she gave him back to God. He knew that story, and he knew her dedication to the Lord and her love for the Lord. And I've got to believe that what I believe is one of the greatest men in the Old Testament, and Samuel has to be one of the greatest men in the Old Testament. This is a remarkable fellow. He really is. One of the reasons that he was so remarkable is because of his mama and the way he was raised and what she showed him and what she taught him. I remember it was in a conversation, this was a number of years ago, and I was visiting with a man who at that time was well advanced in years, who had been a child during the Depression. And he was talking about growing up in the Depression and how it was always a struggle to put food on the table. And if I remember right, I think he was one of 9. And so you can imagine trying to feed a family of 11. And one of the things he said is, I always remember the fact Mama never took seconds. And of course what he was saying was, Mama wanted to make sure that Daddy and the kids got enough, and there was hardly ever enough. But if there was any left over, she wanted to be sure that Daddy got it, the kids got it. He says, what I remember about Mama is that Mama never took seconds. And there again is that selflessness that characterizes the heart, I believe, of a godly mother. I was walking around the periphery of the parking lot this week, and I think it was Thursday, as I was walking around the periphery, off over in the corner of the parking lot, there was a baby bird who had died. Now, obviously, it had just hatched out because it didn't have its feathers or anything. It was just maybe that tall, but it was just laying there on the parking lot. And I picked it up and took it off over to one side and laid it out. But it made me think about something, and I've shared this with you before, but it made an impact on me I've never forgotten, I never will forget. I was just a kid, and I was going down to the pasture to gather the cattle and bring them back up for milking. And as I was walking across the pasture, I came across a nest out in the grass, just right out in the open. And there was a bird laying over the nest, and the closer I got, the bird never moved. And I realized then that this bird was dead. Now, that day, earlier, we had had a tremendous thunderstorm. And there had been a lot of hail with it. And when I saw this bird laying there in the grass, I thought, the hail must have killed that bird as she's laying there. But I walked up and I reached down and I turned her over, and underneath her were her eggs. She had laid out there in the grass and let that hail beat her to death while she protected those eggs and made sure with her own body that those eggs weren't broken. Now, she didn't go to parenting classes. She didn't get any lessons about how she was supposed to love those eggs. God put that in her to guard those eggs with her life. And she laid down her life to protect those babies. To me, that is a reflection of the selflessness that God grants to a mother, the blessing that's found in her heart. I would urge you to nurture and train your children properly. Proverbs 22 verse 6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. That's a proverb, that's a truism, okay? Somebody said, well, I know a child, and he was raised up, and he didn't go the way he should go. Well, I mean, it happens, okay? But overall, you train up a child in the way he should go. This is absolutely true. You train up a child in the way he should go. Overall, that's what's going to, he'll go the way he needs to go. He won't depart from it. Or, like that prodigal son, he'll wake up and come home at some point. But here's what I would say. Take the opposite of that. Don't train up a child in the way he should go. Or train him up in the wrong way, and what can you expect? A disaster. That's what you can expect. It is incredibly important that we train up our children in the way they should go. At least then they've got a chance to go in the right way. You know, one of the tragedies out there today in our cultures, we got so many little guys and girls that are just being jerked up, not raised up. They're just kind of having to make it on their own, and bless their hearts. They're not being shown the way they should go. They're not being an example of how they should go. And should we be surprised when they have the problems that they do? Think about the influence of Jochebed on young Moses in Exodus chapter 2. What did that little guy hear? What did Moses hear from his mama? Remember how God works it out for his mama to be his wet nurse after Pharaoh's daughter adopts him and brings him into the royal household? How it's set up so that she can take care of her son? How many times did she tell him, Moses, do you realize how special you are? Do you realize how God took care of you? How he made provision for you? Son, I put you in this little boat and I set you out in the water and I just floated you down the Nile because I didn't know what else to do. You were going to die if I kept you. I didn't know what to do. And God provided Pharaoh's daughter to find you and fall in love with you, and here you are in the royal household, and here I get to raise you, son. Do you realize how God blessed you? Is it accidental that he was one of the great men of faith in the Old Testament? That he did this magnificent job of leading the people of Israel for 40 years? I don't think so. I think a lot of it will go back to the influence of that mom on her son early on. Did Mary have influence on Jesus, growing in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man, as Luke 2:52 says? Absolutely not. Again, I would argue God picked Mary for a reason. God chose her because he wanted the very best mother for his child that could be. And that was this little girl out of Nazareth. She was the one. And there's not a doubt in my mind that what shaped him and molded him and in part made him who he was not just the fact that he was a son of God, but that he was a son of Mary as well. And lastly, I would encourage you to be faithful. Agape never stops, no matter what the circumstances. As John 19:25, as we talked about earlier, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother. It is so important, moms. God is sometimes called a rock, okay? And that's a beautiful picture. But we need rocks in our lives. And by that I don't mean stones we stumble over. I mean solid people that we can stand on and hold to and know that they're going to be there. Know that they're going to stand by us. Know that they're going to love us and care. And that's the gift, moms, that you can give to your children. You know, I'm so blessed because I had a mom never questioned whether or not she loved me. Never questions whether or not she was going to be there for me. Never, ever had an issue with, is my mom going to be there for me? She always was. Always. Again, can I put a price on that gift? Absolutely not, man. I can't. You can't. You can give your children one of the greatest gifts that could possibly be given to them when you agape them, when you seek their highest good. You know, I think about Bathsheba's influence in 1 Kings chapter 1. I don't know if you're familiar with that story. Remember, Bathsheba's the mother of Solomon? And that relationship starts in a real sordid story in a difficult way. But when Solomon's going to come to the throne, he's got an older half-brother who will kill him to get to the throne. And David at this point in time is old and pretty much out of it. And it's Bathsheba. Read the story. It's Bathsheba who steps in and goes to David and says, you need to intervene. You need to step in. You need to make sure that what's going to happen doesn't happen. You can stop it. You can ensure that there'll be a transition of Solomon to the throne, but you've got to do it. And David will. But it's Bathsheba. It's Solomon's mom who steps in and ensures that that's the case. There is a faithful mother. And not only did she bless her son, she blessed the kingdom as well in the process of that. There's no substitute, none, for being faithful. And so, thank God for godly mothers. And as has already been said, if you weren't blessed with a godly mother, be one. Start the cycle. That's what I always tell dads, and that's what I tell moms. If you weren't blessed with a godly father, I hate that, but you can be a godly father. You can start showing your kids God in you. If you weren't blessed with a godly mother, you can be the first in a long line of godly mothers. You can let your children see God in you. And you will make an incredible difference in the lives of your children when you gift them with that example. Again, in mamas, I believe, we see the heart of God. I really do. God created mothers with this special capacity to love. And that love is reflected in the cross and in His willingness to give His Son so that you could have life. That selfless sacrifice that's found there. And if you're ready to appropriate that sacrifice and you haven't, you're ready this morning to confess Jesus and be baptized into Christ. If we can help you in any way in your walk with the Lord, please come while we stand and while we sing.
God is calling the prodigal, come without delay. Hear, O hear him calling, calling now for thee. Though you wander so far from his presence, come today. Hear his loving voice calling still, calling now for thee. Oh, weary prodigal, come, calling out for thee. Oh, weary prodigal, come. Patient, loving, and tenderly still the Father pleads. Hear, O hear him calling, calling out for thee. Oh, return while the Spirit in mercy intercedes. Hear his loving voice calling still.